Morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to this webinar session. I'm Tony Schönenberger. I'm the Executive Chairman of STARS. I'm pleased to inform you that actually we are right in the middle of preparing two STARS symposia, the one in Singapore and the one in Switzerland. And we're also preparing two study tours to Croatia and to China, actually to Guangdong province, to see leading companies in Shenzhen and Guangzhou. Please visit our website for more information. Today, we are continuing our webinar series on the circular economy, a must for business leaders. And no doubt, and you will certainly agree with me, this topic is extremely important, not only for our companies and businesses, but also for the society as a whole. And today we have the great privilege to talk to Dr. Jon Smieja. Jon, welcome to this webinar session.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Jon is the VP of Circularity and Senior Analyst at Trellis Group, which is a media and events company in Minnesota, United States. And he's particularly an expert on the clean economy and on the circular economy. So thank you very much again for joining this session, Jon, and we are very much looking forward to your insights. I want to introduce you now to our moderator. It's Gordana Kierans. Gordana is the managing partner of her consulting company based in Croatia. She's supervisory board member of the Circular Economy, and she's the president of the STARS Southeast Europe Alumni chapter. Gordana designed this important series of 8 webinars on sustainability and the circular economy, and she's also moderating these sessions. So Gordana, once more, thank you very much for designing and moderating, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tony, and you're very welcome. It's my pleasure to do this. I have the greatest task in the world. I talk to the greatest minds. So including today, good morning to Jon. A true pleasure, and welcome to our webinar series.
Yes, thank you again for having me. This is exciting.
To our audience, good morning also to you, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. We're looking forward to your questions. You know the drill. If you attended this before, we of course are welcoming your participation and your curiosity. In the meantime, while we are waiting for our audience, Jon, let's you and I start with questions that I have for you. You are joining us from United States. I do not need to say that your country is in the headlines constantly and that we live in tumultuous times. You are a circular economy enthusiast. I read from your profile, and of course I know your work. I have been following your work for quite some time. How is it to be a circular economist in the United States these days?
That's a really good question. I would say the people who are focused on this are feeling mixed emotions at the moment. You know, there's been many downturns in support for sustainability at the corporate level throughout the last 30 years, right? The 2008 economic crisis, COVID, et cetera. You know, this is a little bit like those in that companies aren't giving up on their initiatives, but they may be sort of shifting resources around, not talking about their work quite as much, et cetera. You know, one thing we've seen, for example, is with new sustainability reporting requirements coming out of Europe and pending in the US, which we'll see if those ever come into play, that companies are putting more resources towards reporting right now instead of initiatives. So we're seeing a little bit of shifting around in people's roles and what they're focused on. But I would say, you know, everyone working on the transition to circular economy, clean energy, other sustainability initiatives feels like we have to, in this political environment in the United States, sort of reframe our efforts. So a lot of people are talking more about efficiency, supply chain risk reduction, language that more closely aligns with the sort of the current political environment here, because the Trump administration is not friendly to terms like climate change and circular economy and the things that we're used to talking about. So it doesn't feel like the end of the world, but it feels a little bit like we have to shift the way we talk about our work.
Yeah, sorry, for us Europeans, has been felt like that ever since he was elected. So for us, but anyways, that's a different story. Yeah, there is an interesting study by PricewaterhouseCoopers actually saying that companies are in certain areas are actually doubling down on their efforts. But as you said, this is less pronounced. But now, since we're talking about this topic, how is it for companies coming from Europe, for example, who want to invest in the United States? What are you seeing in that area?
Yeah, I mean, we just got the announcement, and thanks to Tony for bringing this up. I hadn't seen it overnight, but just got the announcement that Novartis is investing or planning to invest a lot of money here in the United States. But I think from what we've seen so far over here, that feels like the exception and not the norm. I think everyone on this call probably knows companies don't like uncertainty. And right now there's a lot of uncertainty around how the US is going to act in the next 3.5 years. So we've seen here, for example, US-based companies put holds on new manufacturing facilities, lay off employees because of the tariff threats. And I have to imagine it's going to be hard for a lot of companies to be confident in investing in the US over the coming years. So I think what we've seen so far is just this holding pattern because of the uncertainty. And I think as this trade war tariff fight plays out, we'll start to get a better view. But right now it might be a little bit too early to see what's going to happen longer term.
Yeah, I was also surprised by the Novartis announcement because I read several articles. The capital is fleeing United States. Europe, of course, is one of the winners of that trend, but we are going to see. Let's go back to the previous administration. The Biden administration passed what was called the Inflation Reduction Act. And despite the name, the name doesn't really indicate any climate or circular initiatives, it was actually the biggest climate bill in the history of the United States. Of course, with lots of funding and so on and so on. So what's happening to this bill right now?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of money from the Inflation Reduction Act was already out the door. So that's good news. There are projects already being worked on because of the Inflation Reduction Act. The bad news is that the Trump administration put a freeze on all of the new funding to go out. And so I think a lot of people that were expecting funding had already won grants or funding from the IRA are now putting a hold on that work. And I think, one of the things we're starting to see is that these companies in the clean energy and sustainability and infrastructure spaces are starting to lobby Congress because really that money was appropriated by Congress and should be spent. And our Congress is sort of sitting on their hands right now and not doing the work they should be doing to make sure that money continues to go out. So the current strategy, I would say, is for companies and the people who are supposed to be benefiting from that money are starting to lobby their Congress people to take back the power that they have of dispersing money. So we'll see how that works in the longer term. I think we will still get one of the challenges, of course, with a law like the Inflation Reduction Act is a lot of the benefits we're going to be seeing 5-10 years down the road because of these big investments in infrastructure that came along with it. So, hopefully once some of those projects start to go online, there'll be more of an outcry to spend the rest of the money that was allocated to that program.
Yeah, let's hope that kind of the ball got rolling and it's impossible to downhill. It's possible to stop it at this point. Let's hope that this money brought the right type of avalanche. And of course, you know this better than we do. Your country is very diverse, at the state level. So what's happening at the state level? How are the states adjusting themselves to this? And are they freeing some funds for circularity?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that's sort of that's the shining light or the hope that we have right now. You know, of our 50 states, it's not quite half, but about half are democratically controlled, about half are Republicans. A lot more people live in democratically controlled states. So what we are seeing now is that the US states that do have Democratic governors and Democratic legislatures are actually pushing forward faster than they might otherwise be, as a means to sort of push back against the current administration's policies. And this, this spans from reproductive rights to voting rights, and of course, climate change and circular economy are part of that. Specifically on the circular economy, states are continuing to move forward with their own extended producer responsibility laws that folks in Europe will be familiar with.
Yep.
And they're modeled after the European extended producer responsibility laws. So we're seeing those pop up in states across the country in packaging, fashion, batteries, a bunch of different places actually. And just in the last 3 years actually, 6 states have passed extended producer responsibility for packaging. The first of those coming actually starting to collect funds and actually coming online this year. So we're still seeing progress at the state level. There are a handful of other states that are still considering extended producer responsibility. So that's good to see. Of course, the challenge with that being with 50 states and potentially 20 different extended producer responsibility laws, companies are concerned about how to manage those, right? And I think they're going to have to lean heavily on their producer responsibility organizations to make sure that they know how they're paying in, how much they're paying into these various state laws that aren't fully aligned. So it's exciting to see that states are still pushing forward with policies and laws to try to move the ball. But it's also a little bit worrisome that it's a state by state patchwork approach. Fortunately, California, which is a very large economy, is leading some of those charges. So that'll be helpful, I think. A lot of companies tend to align with whatever California is doing because of the just volume of things they sell into that economy.
Yeah, California is also always the locomotive of change, isn't it? The federal law always gets adjusted according to California, what California passes. Now, of course, speaking of Europe, the European continent or the EU is introducing the digital product passport. This will also impact companies working with Europe in the near future, because you mentioned batteries, packaging, fashion, especially batteries and fashion are, of course, very much in the focus of the digital product passport. So there will be, of course, lots of changes coming up. The United States is, of course, also known for entrepreneurs. My platform, we are, of course, promoting entrepreneurship within the circular economy, because I firmly believe that the circular economy offers so many opportunities for entrepreneurs. However, nothing will happen unless we have capital, and you have the most active venture capital scene in the world. What is happening in the VC world regarding circularity?
Yeah, this is admittedly not my area of expertise. We do have people here at Trellis that focus on the VC space, and I think what we're seeing, and actually have been seeing for a couple of years now, is that a lot of VCs are holding on to their money. They're not investing quite so freely at the moment, and I think the economic uncertainty that came after the pandemic with inflation and now with the Trump administration is making them a little more nervous to invest. But what we haven't seen, I don't think yet, is a greater withholding of funds in the climate and circular economy space than in other spaces, right? So there's still money going out. There's still some spending happening. We're still seeing, new VCs or new entrepreneurs come in and get funding. For example, at my event, Circularity, and at one of our other events, Verge, that's a climate tech focused event, we have a Startups to Watch competition, and we're still getting about the same volume of startups applying for that. It seems like they're still, able to remain open and keep working on their projects. But yes, again, a lot of this comes back to uncertainty, right? The VCs are just uncertain about the economic conditions and worried about spending a lot of money at the moment. So it's fragile.
I know whenever the investors tell me these arguments that they're uncertain, I always ask, how much money are you spending on AI?
Yes. They're clearly still spending on that. Yes.
Yes, because then it turns out that it's an excuse sometimes. So that is always the comparison or the benchmark for us when we do these conversations. Another topic, one of the things that I believe is an important enabler in addition to financing is the infrastructure, because we do have to move goods back and forth and especially return them. So from our European perspective, this is what we perceive. You correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't traveled extensively your country. Canada, yes, but not your country. Infrastructure seems to be a challenge. There are several reasons, the investments, whatever. So what is happening in terms of what is necessary in terms of infrastructure to support the circular economy?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We have a lot of infrastructure needs that some startups are trying to fill. But at the same time, I think a lot of our larger companies are also thinking about their needs in this space. So, reverse logistics is one. As you mentioned, we don't have the reverse logistics, the consolidation centers, the processes to get products back to resell, repair, refurbish. And so there's, I think part of that gap, it seems like it's going to be filled by the major logistics companies that exist now. I've had conversations just in the past year with some of the railroad companies here in the United States about how they want to get into reverse logistics because they see it as a future business opportunity. And we know that FedEx and UPS and some of the larger shipping companies are also thinking along those lines. So reverse logistics is a big one. We also are really we're really lacking in the companies or the facilities that can do the inspection, repair, remanufacturing, refurbishment of products to get them out the door again for a second life. So we're seeing some startups fill that space. We're also seeing some of the larger companies start setting up their own operations to be able to inspect and repair products. Recycling is obviously a big gap in our infrastructure. For so long we relied on other parts of the world to recycle our plastics. We sent our used textiles to other parts of the world. As everyone probably knows, a lot of that has been shut down. So I think the United States is currently trying to catch up on recycling infrastructure, and some of our major waste management companies are stepping into the void. Waste Management, Republic Services, some of those big national companies are starting to build their own recycling facilities to try to fill some of that gap. So we're seeing a little bit of that as well. And then I think one thing that's really important that we definitely don't have here is this is a simple one, but the cleaning infrastructure for things like reusable packaging. Many of our fast food or fast casual restaurants are not set up to clean reusable dishes. Most of our venues are not set up to clean reusable cups and reusable dishware for like concerts and sporting events and things like that. So we're starting to see some really interesting startups grow here, like our Worlds and Turn and Bold Reuse, that are setting up their own cleaning infrastructure so that they can move from city to city and start setting up operations to do this cleaning for reusable packaging. So you're very right. There's a lot of infrastructure gaps. Part of it, I think, is just the geography, the size of the United States makes it difficult to consolidate things. Part of it is the state-by-state approach that we have, and part is also just that we underinvested for a long time as we were sending recyclables overseas. So I think there's a lot of catch up that needs to be done. And hopefully the extended producer responsibility laws that are passed will help build that infrastructure faster with the funding from those laws.
Yeah, in that context, the current tensions that are just intensified with China, who is now, of course, one of the major sources of raw materials, helps us understand and value the secondary materials more, because it's easier if you have the infrastructure. It would be easier to get those back instead of getting them from the other side of the world.
For sure.
Recycling. Recycling is a topic that you and I, as circular economists, have mixed relationship with, mixed feelings about. Yes, we do have to recycle, but after we redesign things, because at the current point we know that our products are not designed for recycling, and the loss is still very, very big. But sometimes we have to ask the underlying system. We have to question the underlying system. Does the underlying system make sense? And plastics is something that you mentioned. Doors are closing on anybody taking over our garbage or waste. I should use, or secondary materials actually is the term I should use, because all the other two have a negative connotation. So is anybody when you talk to companies and during the time you organize the conference and so on, are you seeing some systemic questions? I'm off to Vancouver, to British Columbia, after this talk. There is the biggest kelp farm being built in British Columbia, which is great. It's an alternative packaging material. That's why it's built. But we have to ask ourselves, why do we need plastics? Why so much packaging?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, we haven't seen a lot of companies fully grapple with this challenge yet, right? Most of the companies that I interact with regularly are they're still working to, make their packaging more recyclable, incorporate more recycled content, rather than rethinking the design. So packaging is definitely a difficult category here. And when I think about the challenges across the economy, across the entire economy with circular initiatives, you've got your products like automobiles and consumer electronics that sort of make sense to start building circular economy now. They have high value materials. Yeah. People use them regularly, so there's a constant sort of reminder of the thing. So they're already building circular economy initiatives just on their own. In things like packaging and fashion, it has been such a race to use cheaper, more convenient materials that the value is not there, right? We know that the secondary value of these materials is incredibly low, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't really matter if their origin is fossil fuels or kelp or some other biomaterial, right? The value of the material itself is still low. And I think that's sort of the biggest mindset change that companies are still struggling with, is just how cheap their materials are, and how unwilling they currently are to make a change, because there's nothing as cheap as plastics. And so, this is a problem that we're going to be challenged with for quite some time. We will see what happens with something like the Global Plastics Treaty. The next negotiating meeting for that is in August in Geneva. The last one didn't go so well, so we're hoping for some more progress here. But it seems like no major company is going to make a huge move to remove the plastics from their packaging until someone tells them they have to.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. When I do my training in the Middle East, I always drop the term plastic as a service, because we do have a chance to start there. And of course, with some investment that will eventually pay off, we could make it possible to start product by product, pilot projects, and so on and so on. So there are opportunities.
One more thing I'd mention, if I could. So the other thing that is striking to me as I think about plastics is that we haven't yet lived through a full human lifespan of people having plastics all around them, right? The oldest people living right now didn't really have plastics everywhere in their lives when they were kids. And so I think there's the one thing that could shift this dynamic is as the science begins to or continues to develop around the health effects of plastics in our body, in our lives, everywhere around us. And that is one That's I don't agree with the current administration here in the US on many things, but that's one glimmer of hope, is that they do have some people in the administration that are worried about things like the health concerns of the materials around us, the health concerns of the food additives we have. So we'll see if there's any progress there over the coming decade or so on that science. But that is sort of, it's bad to have that as your point of hope, because the way it'll change is if we find out that it is harming us. But that does seem like one area that could change our relationship to plastics in the coming years.
No, definitely. I mean, now there is a new research on microplastics, and it's even affecting photosynthesis. I mean, this is serious. Our addiction to plastics is really serious. So we do have to do more in this area and speed up. Let's see what happens in a near future. Education. We also have to educate ourselves. Of course, one of the big topics is that the graduates enter companies and they are the leaders of the next generation. This is the focus of STARS as well. So are we preparing graduates with enough circular economy knowledge and value of products? Because this is what you mentioned earlier, which is very important. Professor Adriana Mazzucato from London College of London, I think she, for example, in one of her books talks about in the past, we used to make everything ourselves. So of course the value was very high, as was the price. And now when we moved to somebody else, the price went down and our sense of value. But I do always ask my students, and also in my Udemy course, when something is cheap, who paid the price? And I believe that we have to teach that young people from all through the school system, and especially university, at the university level, because these are future engineers, developers, product designers, whoever. So you have the most famous universities in the world. What's happening there?
I think we're starting to see some progress there. I'll age myself here, but I graduated from college here in the US 20 years ago, almost exactly 20 years ago. And when I was in college, this wasn't a thing, right? There were no sustainability classes. There were no green chemistry classes. There was no way to learn about the circular economy. And now, and this is obviously a small sample size, but I'm invited regularly to guest lecture in classes that are based on sustainable business and the transition to, low carbon, low or high efficiency circular economy sort of businesses. So there are classes at every major university now that teach this. There are full degrees on it. So that's a good start. I think one of the challenges is that it's hard to apply a sustainable business degree or courses in sustainable business once you get inside of those businesses, because of the challenges of, most companies, no matter how big they are, have a small sustainability team that is a little bit like spies in their own company, right? They're always telling people they're doing things wrong, they need to be better. So of course the challenge is teaching people how to navigate a system where you're not really wanted by a lot of the people that work at that company. And I think we still have a lot of work to do there. But there is hope, right? There is a lot more courses, a lot more degree programs, and a lot more educational opportunities for people to learn about this topic before they get out of school than there was 10 to 20 years ago. So
yeah, we are the most popular people always, aren't we?
yeah.
But we got used to that. I graduated, I actually completed my master's studies 2001 and in Germany. And we had back in 1996, at the beginning of my studies, we actually had one course on waste management. And while every other program, every other course had about a few hundred students, especially at the beginning, before that kind of thinned out, that course had about 10. And I would think by the end of the semester, we were something 5 or 6. So you can see how popular that topic was back then. Yes, we have to do a lot in a sense in that area. When I worked in Brussels for a global network, the former director always used to say, a company should have only one chief sustainability officer, and that should be the CEO, the only one. Yeah. Our audience remains silent, Jon, but you and I are coming to an end. I have the window here open for our audience if you want still to ask a brief question. Jon, you have a famous countryman, an inspiring person, Dr. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. He didn't say I have a nightmare, I have a dream. So let's keep it in honor his vision and his inspiration and his legacy and be positive and visionary. What is your vision for the circularity in the United States?
Yeah, this feels like it changes from day to day. But right now, I think I'm hopeful for the circular economy because of the possibility for businesses within it, right? The actual business driver exists. So I think, you know, my ray of hope, the steps that people can take to sort of move to the next level is really framing this discussion around the business opportunity, making a business case for it. And of course, the challenge is still going to be that a lot of circular economy initiatives, especially at big companies, are going to have slightly longer payback periods, right? The return on investment is going to be a little bit longer than switching to LED lighting, for example. But it exists and it's there, and it offers opportunities for companies to have stable supply chains, really broaden their customer base to include people who may not have been able to afford or may not have thought they could afford their products on the first go around. So I think, you know, my ray of hope for the circular economy is really that there is a business imperative to make the shift, and people working within companies just need to really get better at making that argument.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There is so much potential, business potential behind it. That's suddenly something that makes business sense, economic sense. Everything else was nice to have, but this is one that really makes business sense. I'm sure that our audience will be interested in connecting with you, following your articles, of course, on Trellis, maybe joining your conference, which is happening in Denver in just a few weeks from now, and happening every year. I hope to meet you at one of these of your conferences in the future. I won't make it this year, but maybe next year. So is LinkedIn the best option, or how can they reach out?
Yes, people can find me on LinkedIn. My email address is also very easy. It's Jon, Jon, @trellis.net. I'm always happy to chat if people want to reach out.
Jon, this is such a pleasure. After reading so many insightful articles of yours, talking to you today, of course, I could go on now for a very long time, but we reserved 30 minutes of your valuable time. So we'll keep it, we're a little bit over time, we'll keep it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Wonderful. Our audience, thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. We are almost at the end of this webinar series. We have one more session in 2 weeks from now. We are going to the Southern Hemisphere, to Brazil, and you will see about what's happening. You will see what's happening in Brazil regarding circularity. And of course, for those of you who are celebrating, I wish you a happy Easter. All the best and see you next time.